Here we go. All right, this is a speech we began at the beginning of the week, and we left it to go to another speech that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave. But let's come back to this. Here's a speech where the Rebbe asks an interesting question, and it's relevant to this week's Torah portion. In this week's Torah portion, it says that Moses stood up the tabernacle. Really, that's not what it says. It says that the tabernacle was erected. It was stood up. It didn't say that Moses did it. It was stood up. The commentaries explain what happened, that on that day that the tabernacle was made, was stood up permanently, Moses did it alone. Moses did it alone, and the boards were too heavy. He couldn't lift them up alone. He couldn't lift the boards up alone. And so God said, just put your hand there, and God helped him. So to speak, God did the whole thing. Who come? Who come means it was erected. It was stood up. Not that Moses did it. So the Rebbe asked the question. The fact is that this day when the tabernacle, the Mishkan, when it was erected and it stood, this was preceded by 7 days of preparation. 7 days is called the 7 days of Miluim, the 7 days of inauguration. And this, when the Mishkan was actually erected, finally, this was really the 8th day. This is after the 7 days of, and this was on the first day of Nisan, the month of Nisan. That's when it was erected, almost 1 year after the Jews got out of Egypt. That's when it was erected. So on those 7 days, previous days, the boards were lifted up alone. God didn't help them. They were lifted up alone. So it seems that on the other 7 days, the preceding days, that Moses lifted them up and maybe the people helped him. And then there's two opinions. There's the Ramban and there's Rashi. Ramban says that in fact it was a commandment for the Jewish people to help Moses on the previous 7 days. And Rashi says it was not a commandment, but Moses inferred it from the words because there were supposed to be these 7 days of preparation. That it says clearly, but that the tabernacle should be stood up. He inferred that. Okay. However, it comes out that on the 8th day, this day when it was actually stood up permanently, suddenly it was heavier. The logs, the walls of the tabernacle, which were made of these huge wood, this cedar wood, whatever it was, on that day was heavier. And not only that, on that day, Moses had to do it. And on that day, not only Moses had to do it, but even if anyone would have helped him, it wouldn't have worked out. It was just too heavy. It couldn't have been lifted up. God had to do it with Moses. It was who come. It was done automatically. And then it stood permanently. Oh, so it says, what can we learn from this? This is a hint at the temples, the temples. So to speak, the first temple and the second temple, they were sort of like preparations. That's like sort of like the 7 days of fulfilling. And because they were made by man. And the third temple is going to be made by God. So it'll be permanent. Okay, this all depends on our work. The whole idea of the Holy Temple was that we should do the work. We serve God. Okay, so let's go. Miyayin al shel Torah. From the wine of the Torah, the secrets of the Torah. Now we're going to learn. What are the implications of this whole story? You do it is known that there's two terms. One is called arousal from below and arousal from above. Etaruta, in terms of the Zohar, etaruta, an arousal from below, and etaruta de la Eila, an arousal from above. Okay, according to the Zohar, and Chassidut really makes a big thing of this. According to the Zohar, the world was created and man was created by God because God wants man to stimulate God. God wants man to stimulate him, God. God reacts to what we do. What we do is called an arousal from below, and how God reacts is called an arousal from above. Right? Okay. But if you read the simple story of the Bible, you see that God created the world in 6 days. On the sixth, before man was created, man was the last thing to be created. So God created the world on his own. There was no arousal from below. So we see that God also can arouse, self-aroused, if you want to call it. God can give blessings even though we don't do anything. So that's what's called. Here we go. In this arousal from above, there's 2 levels. One is that it comes after what we do. God reacts to what we do. And there's another one, which is an arousal from God, which is above what we do. Even though that these 2 reactions of God, these 2 actions, what do you want to call of God, whatever you want to call them, these 2 aspects of God, that God reacts to what we do, or God acts on his own, an arousal from above, which is above anything that we can do, even though that they're incomparable one to the other, but they have one thing between them. What is between them? We'll see. Okay, let's do this. Okay, says the Rebbe, the Rebbe said, I'm not going to talk so much about what's similar, but I want to talk about the differences. Again, God creates the world not so that God will leave the world, not like all these Eastern religions and things like that say that if there is a God, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about it. There's just natural processes, there's spiritual processes, there's karma, there whatever it is. No, we don't say that in Judaism. There is also that. That's also true. But that's not. God is intimately involved in everything that we do. He's creating us, he cares about us, and he reacts to us. But sometimes he reacts to us before we even do anything. God sometimes, like for instance, going out of Egypt, right? Going out of Egypt, God did it on his own. That's what we just finished learning. Giving the Torah, God gave it on his own. There's nothing that we did that could evoke such an amazing reaction as giving the Torah. So God did, not only that, we weren't fitting. We didn't have any ability to do anything. So, okay. There's an advantage in each one of these. If we arouse God or God does it on his own. The advantage of an arousal from above is that light is drawn down from God. God, he decides. It's not, you say, measured out at all. According to what we do, God, no, it's not according. God just gives whatever he wants to. But the advantage of an arousal from below is that the world becomes refined. The world becomes a partner with God. If God just creates everything from above, so the world isn't appreciative. If we do it from below, then the world is appreciative, but the result is not as great. The resultant blessing from God is not as great. Or even the light which is drawn down from above, from God, is not comparable to light which is drawn down on its own. But nevertheless, because of the novelty that we are serving God, that's a new thing. Yesh b'zeh achavivus. Excuse me. This is precious. Miucheres. Adasher adam rotza b'kav shelo mitesha kavim shel chaviro. A person would rather earn $100 on his own. He appreciates the money more. If he would earn $100, he appreciates that $100 more than if he was given as a free gift $1,000. So it's a big novelty if we return gifts. I just read now. It's a bizarre story. I really don't understand the story, but I read it just now that there's a taxi stopped in, I guess maybe it was Williamsburg, one of these, ultra orthodox places in in New York, Satmar, maybe it was Satmar or one of those places. Anyway, the cab stopped, and he gave to one of the young men over there. He said, "One of you lost this this backpack." What is it? The driver? The whole thing is not understood. But anyway, the driver took some people back from the airport, and he left them off there in this stop, I guess, in Williamsburg. And one person forgot to take his bag. So the driver stopped at the same stop, came back to the same stop, and he saw these religious fellows there, and he gave them the bag. He said, somebody lost it. So they said, hey, we didn't lose the bag, and he just took off. So they asked around, did anybody lose this bag? There was no name on it. And nobody knew. Nobody said they lost the bag. So they opened the bag up, and it was filled with diamonds. It was worth like $100,000. There was raw diamonds and this diamonds. The whole story is really a bizarre story. Anyway, they tracked the guy down who lost it. It was some black guy, and he lost it. He didn't want to say his name or anything like that. It could be they were stolen. I don't know what it was. In any case, they gave it back. That's the point. They gave it back. And this person, he wanted to give them a reward. He said, I don't want a reward. We just found it. We didn't do anything. And because it's a good thing, you're supposed to return back lost things. Anyway, so they gave it back. So this is a big novelty. You understand? It was in the news. It was a this. So it's a big thing that you give back what was given to you. It's a big novelty. People want to take. They want to receive. And it could be that according to the Torah, you could have found some way that it was permissible 100% for them to keep this diamonds and the money or whatever it was. But whatever the reason was, they gave it back. And it was a big novelty. And they found the person. They showed a picture of the guy. The guy didn't want to say his name. A strange story. But the point of the story is not all the weird stuff of it. Was it stolen? Was it contraband? Whatever. Who's the person that lost it? The point is that they gave it back. That's a big novelty. That's a big novelty. And he gave it back. So let's take an example. Here we got, right? So what do we say? If there is an arousal from God, God does the whole thing, then the blessing is much bigger. But it doesn't refine the lower world. On the other hand, if the person returns what God gives, he's the one that's giving back to God, then the reward is not as great, but it prepares the world. Let's take that in the example I just gave, right? If they would have just kept the gift that they got from God, this bag full of diamonds, so they would have had $100,000, or how much it was, a bigger gift, but it wouldn't have refined them. And if they would have given it back and gotten a reward, so let's say it would have given them $10,000, right? But it would have been theirs. It would have been that they did it because of a good deed that they did themselves. Right? And in the end, they thought it was better the good deed than getting the money. Maybe they thought the money was illegal also. I don't know what the story was. But the fact of the matter is that they did give it back. And that's a tremendous reward to them. Just the honesty, that they got honesty. Honesty is worth more than the money. So that's the difference between standing up of the Mishkan and the 7 days of the Miluim to this of the 7 days of preparation, and the last day of the first day of Nisan, which that's the 8th day, when it stood up permanently. On the 7 days, the Jewish people, they stood up the Mishkan, the temple, 7 times. They stood it up and they took it apart. And since that there was not a clear commandment for them to do it, but Moses learned that he should do that, he implied from what it says in the sentences. So therefore, there is a special dearness in this. This is Moses did it himself. This is especially special. That's the 7 days. He did it on his own. But by means of this, it wasn't done, there wasn't made a permanent building. Shazeh al Shem v'shechanti. Adayan, there was not yet, the Shekhinah did not rest there. There was all the work that we do is wonderful. It prepares us, but it doesn't really bring the big blessing down. On the 8th day, which is the first day of Nisan, that's when the clearly was a commandment to stand up the Mishkan. Then the Shekhinah was there. That's why it says that on the 8th day, in other words, this, when it was actually stood up, that Moses didn't do it on his own. God had to do it. God had to, who come? It was done automatically. Even according to the Ramban, that he says that these 7 days, the previous days, they were commanded by God. Nevertheless, they weren't set because this was working from below. According to this, now we can understand why. On the first day of Nisan was stood up the Mishkan on its own. On the final day, which is the first day of Nisan, that's the 8th day. So that's after the 7 days of preparation, that it was stood up on its own. There was no human being that was able to lift up those logs, the walls, I'm sorry, the boards. No human being could do it. And on the 7 days, it says Moses did it on his own. Maybe it could be other Jewish people did it also, the Mishkan. But nevertheless, it was possible for human beings to stand up these boards on the 7 days of preparation. But on this last day, it wasn't possible. God had to do it. Why? Because on the 7 days of the inauguration, the preparation, this is just a preparation. This is just working from us, what we did. We were just preparing the vessels, so to speak, for God's blessing. And it was in order that afterwards God's presence should be there. This presence made possible and was necessary in order. I'm sorry. This preparation had to be from us, from below. And that was the 7 days. But on the last day, when the tabernacle stood up permanently on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, that then it was Asalim Migdash. Then they were doing the commandment of making me a holy place, and I will dwell within them. That's the making of the Mishkan. Then God's Shekhinah, his presence, rested there in a permanent way, like it was on Mount Sinai. This is impossible. It can be done by means of anything we do. We had to make the vessels. We had to make the preparation. But God's revelation in it was not commensurate at all to our efforts. It was infinitely greater. This is a thing which is above, an arousal from above, which that's the whole thing of the Jewish people. The Jewish people, everything was from above. God took us out. Okay, we didn't have the advantage that we had made vessels for it. So that was lacking. But the revelation was, that's essence of Jews, miracles. Behold, in order for the first day of Nisan, that the tabernacle should be stood up and the Shekhinah should be there in an inner way, in a permanent way, that therefore, in a permanent way, in other words, that the world had to be ready for it, that we had to do the work, and every single Jew, there had to be, before even the whole business started, there had to be the donations, the contributions of the Jewish people, nidvas lev, from the willingness of their heart of every single Jew to the Mishkan. So first of all, there had to be, in order for this revelation of the essence of God, the creator of the universe, the reason why the universe is being created, that it should be revealed permanently inside of every human being. All right, when God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, so it didn't last that long. Like we say, only 40 days later, they worshiped the golden calf. The Jewish people knew God. They felt it, but they couldn't internalize it. It wasn't the thing that was personal to them, that it meant it controlled the future. It wasn't sufficient that it comforted them for the future, right? The future was uncertain. They were worried. They didn't feel that they were in God's hands. Why didn't they feel they were in God's hands? because they thought that they were the bosses. They didn't know really any alternative. They couldn't really internalize this awareness of who they really are, of what God wants from them. They couldn't. So now the tabernacle was supposed to be that God is going to be here permanently. But permanently means it has to be inside of the Jews as well. It has to be inside of them. That there shouldn't be the same mistake as in Mount Sinai. So therefore, they had to make all sorts of preparations. First of all, the Jewish people, they brought the contributions, gold, silver, copper, the different stones, the furs they had to bring. Then afterwards, it was given over to the wise men of Israel, the artisans, that they could make the Mishkan. And then after they finished doing that, then they made they made everything. They made the boards, they made everything. Then they brought it to Moshe. And Moshe, because he joined the Jewish people with God, then he stood up the tabernacle 7 days, more preparations, so that the Jewish people would be able to integrate the oneness of God in their day-to-day lives and their regular personalities. Then Moses stood it up. That was the 7 days. And he prepared it. But when it actually was there permanently and God was dwelling them in there, this did not depend on the Jewish people. The Jewish people made the preparations, but what they got, the result was not comparable to the efforts that they put in. This was me'elav. It says that the tabernacle stood up on its own. Hukam. This is an arousal from above, which is totally above any arousal that could possibly be from below. Like the same thing that was on Mount Sinai. An amazing revelation of God that no human being, no Jew could possibly bring about. Oh, so this is going to prepare for us that this is how things are going to be, right? This is how things are going to be. This is how Judaism is going to be. God took us out of Egypt, and he said, now make a permanent place for me to dwell, so you'll always feel godliness in everything that you do. You'll everything. And in order to feel this, you have to make a lot of preparations. And that's how it's going to be for the next remainder of Judaism. This is 3,300 years ago. This happened, a little bit less. According to what we said before, now we can understand the Midrash, and according to the opinion of Rashi, namely that the 7 days of preparation, Moses learned that. It wasn't directly commanded. Moses just assumed that from other things that are written in the Torah. So now we can say the Azla Bazeh Lashita say the severe that this goes according to Rashi's opinion, that he says that the future Beit HaMikdash that we're waiting for, that it's already built and it's already in all of its details. It's already there somewhere in heaven. I have absolutely no idea what this could possibly mean, but there's a physical, actual building that weighs how much? I mean, I'm not an architect, but I will imagine it weighs like, 100,000 tons, a building, and it's in heaven, and it's all built, and it's all ready. This is according to Rashi. Rashi is not Kabbalistic. There's a simple law. It will be revealed and it will come from heaven. Like it says, Mikdash Hashem konani yadecha. Like it says, the third temple, God will make, your hands will make. This is part of the song that the Jewish people sang after they crossed over the Yam Suf, the Red Sea. L'shita zu, according to this, al afa iloi, even though there's going to be so amazing, they see the highness of us serving God, doing commandments, etc., standing through all these tests and difficulties, but nevertheless, it's impossible that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, should be the Shekhinah because of our work. Eladavka, but it has to be some sort of an arousal from above, which is totally above, incomparable to anything that we could possibly do in this world. Therefore, after despite all of the high highness and greatness of our service, what we did in the 7 days of the inauguration, that they stood up the tabernacle and they took it down, it says many times, but that it stood up permanently after the 7 days of preparation, that it should be permanently. This was only because of Hakam Ma'alav. It came automatically. Therefore, he says that the future temple, the third temple, will not be built by means of man. It'll be revealed from heaven. That's all. One second. But Rambam, Maimonides, he says clearly that Moshiach is going to build the third temple. The same Maimonides that we've been talking about, that he says that Moshiach is going to build it. And also Rambam also goes according to his way of thinking, that working from below, that's the main thing, that the working from below, this is more important than any revelation from above. This is only in relation to the tabernacle and the temple. This is according to what we said before, that even though that in the tabernacle and the temple and the holy temple, there were two separate things, two general things. Number one second, let's do this here. Number one, there was God's presence was there. Like we said before, Osol Mikdash, God said, make me a holy temple. You make it. And Shechanti, I will dwell there. That's number one. I will dwell. And the other one is Avodah Shenasid. After that, there's the service that the Jewish people did afterwards. What's the main thing in the Holy Temple? God's presence or the service of the Jewish people? He says, well, there's two things. Let's discuss this. But mainly, there was two things. First of all, God's presence was there. That's mainly in the Holy of Holies. And also, there was the work we did. That was the Mizbeach, the altars that we had. They said the main thing is the sacrifices that they made. The Jewish people went up to the holidays. The Jewish people did it. According to the Rambam, the Maimonides, the main thing is the commandment of God is the second thing, the altar. That's why that's the first thing that's talked about in the Torah, in Parshas the Truma, when they're making God gives the commandment to make the tabernacle. The first thing he talks about is the altar. Avodah Zamat. This is the Beit Muchan Lahakri Bor Karbonos many times in the year. 1 second. Give me a second. 1 second. No. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. That's not right. The first thing that's mentioned over there is not that. 1 minute. It is the ark. The first thing that's mentioned over there, that's the opinion of the Ramban. That's right. 1 second. Okay. Excuse me. Just 1 second. Made a mistake. The first thing that's mentioned over there is the ark. I'll say Aaron Atzei Shitim. That's the first name. Here it goes. 1 second. Yes. I'm sorry. Made a mistake. Let's go back. Maimonides says the main thing is the service of the Jewish people. That's the importance of the altar, outer altar. Ramban says the main thing is the revelation of God, that God is revealed there. That's why the first thing mentioned is the ark, not the altar, like I said, the ark. Maimonides says the main thing of the Holy Temple is that it's a place where they sacrifice sacrifices. The reason for this, so sacrifice, that's what we do. And the ark, that's what God did. What God does, it reveals himself, the Shekhinah. The reason for this is that even though, according to Rambam, the Maimonides, even though the main thing is God's presence that comes from above, and this is incomparable to anything we can do, so why does Rambam, Maimonides, say that the main thing is what we do? Nevertheless, when we do the work, then it's more valuable to us. A person would want one portion that he worked for than getting 10 portions free. He appreciates it more. It's our service, the work of the people. When God commanded the Jewish people to make a holy temple, then the intention was that we should work from below. That God made a Shekhinah, that's God's business. The main thing, says Rambam, the main thing in the holy temple is what we do. What we do. Therefore, in the future, says the Rambam, Maimonides says, that Moshiach, he'll build the holy temple. That's what Rambam says. Moshiach will build it. But the Midrash and Rashi, they say no, that it's going to come from God. And this we're going to discuss, God willing, tomorrow. See how much is left over. 1 second. And it's not very much left. Should we try to finish it? Why not? Finish it. Let's still finish it. Let's go. There we go. No, we're not going to finish. Okay. Again. But according to Rashi, it says that it's going to come, that the third temple is going to come from above. It's going to come from above. How does this fit in? This we're going to talk about tomorrow. How is it going to talk tomorrow? And now, a Yom Yom. Today is very interesting Yom Yom.